Hey there, it's Kari at StudioR12 Stencils, and today we're going to show you how to do a rustic bee project with a little bit of pizzazz. Stay with us. We have a lot to do today, so let's go ahead and dive right in. I have already base coated this MDF surface. This is what it naturally looks like. I have base coated it with a dark brown. So today's project is going to be a little bit rustic, a little bit glam, and the rustic is going to come from the background. So we have the background base coated with a brown acrylic paint, and we are going to base coat an off-white over top of that. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do it. We're using a polyfoam brush, and we can go at it two different ways. We can go at it where we are fully covering the project, and you can see when we get to the edges we are sweeping off rather than pulling toward us, so we don't prevent, or so that we do prevent getting paint along the edges. You do have the option of painting your edges if you wish. Most of the surfaces that you'll get from us at StudioR12 have black along the edges. We like to keep them black, but you can paint them the color of your background. And be sure that if you are not already subscribed to us with StudioR12's YouTube channel, then go ahead and subscribe and ring the bell so that you can be notified anytime that we add new videos. We are the place to go for stenciling, crafting, painting, DIY tips, tricks, tutorials. We have hundreds of videos, all different formats, quick ones, long ones, Q&As for you to watch and learn. So we've done half of this with the really thick off-white background. The other way that you could do this is to have your brush not really loaded and to go into it. And I didn't add any extra paint. This is just paint that's left over from doing the other portion of the background. You can also achieve this by loading paint and then offloading it on the side of your palette. So then you have a little bit of cover with the brown still showing. So this is kind of the look that we're going for, with a little bit more, because we're going to be using black paint to do most of our stenciling. So we want our background to be covered just enough that the black will pop off of it. So say that we decided to do the really heavy coating. Let's get that dry, and then I'll show you how we would make that into the rustic portion. Okay, so you're going to know that your background is dry when it's no longer tacky and it's no longer cool. If it's cool to the touch, that means it's still a little wet. So once it is not cool and not tacky, you are good to go. I'm going to grab a sanding block. This is one of our affiliate links that we have listed below. It's through Amazon, and we love these for working on our projects. It just fits nicely in your hand, and you just wrap your sandpaper on both sides. This is a really rough grit. We also have a really soft grit that we'll use for just going over our project at the very end if we really don't want it to look like it's sanded, but we want it to be nice and smooth. For our rustic backgrounds though, we are going to use a really, really hard grit to get in and do some work. So I'm just taking my sanding block back and forth on my project to bring out some of the brown. So you can see this side is a little bit more patchy, depending on if you're going to use your brush to do your distressing or if you're going to use your sanding block. You can also get in here and apply a little more pressure at some different areas. Oh, I know I didn't get that in there quite enough. You can also use a small piece. Whenever we take the sandpaper off the sanding blocks, we always keep the bits that are up inside here. And then you can get in and go into a specific area and really dig in there and choose exactly where you want to be the most distressed. Okay, now our background is painted and ready to go. I did go back over the right side of the background with the off-white and coated it just so that the left and right side of this project matched. And then I went over the whole project with our sanding block so that it has a nice even tone. So now it is time to stencil, and I am so excited. We are using our new Hive Rules stencil. It has our Be Humble, Be Kind, Be You with the bee, and then this amazing border, and we're gonna do something super fun with that. But we're going to start with a honeycomb. I love the honeycomb stencils with our bee stencils. We actually have a line of bee stencils that the stencil comes with honeycomb patterns, so you'll have to go to StudioR12.com, look up bees and see all of the fun ones. And when you get there, you'll get a pop-up with a spinny wheel. You can spin the wheel and be added to our newsletter. We send out a newsletter 6 days a week with different tips, tricks, lessons, blog posts, and that's where you'll find out about all of our sales. And when you spin the wheel, you have the opportunity to get a discount. So you'll want to jump over there and do that. So let's go ahead, and we are not going to cover the whole background with the honeycomb. We're just going to do a couple of different spots here and there. And we're actually going to use this honeycomb stencil twice. We're going to do a base coat with the honeycomb stencil. We're going to do our stenciling of our main stencil, and then we're gonna come back to the honeycomb stencil at the end and add a little pizzazz. So we are using more of a golden yellow rather than a bright yellow. It just works better with the background that we're using. We're not really going for a really bold, bright look, even though we're gonna have a little fun with it once we get finished. So we are putting our paint out on our palette paper. We are just using acrylic paint. We love those little honey bottles. We get our paint in bulk because we paint so much here. So the honey bottles are really wonderful for just being able to get out a small amount rather than pour from big jugs. So I'm going to use tape here, and we are going to tape actually quite a bit. And this part is going to be personal preference of where you put your honeycombs. So I know that I want a portion coming here to the right. I'm just gonna tape it off around here. Now this is gonna be tedious. This is gonna be you have to go honeycomb by honeycomb, just so that you can make sure that you don't ghost over. We do have a tool called the multi-masker, and that could most certainly be used here. You will just move it along as you go honeycomb by honeycomb, but I'm gonna stick with the old-fashioned way of using the tape. Okay, we finally got this all taped off, but one thing I did want to tell you is that once I started taping it off, I actually turned my stencil. This stencil has the honeycomb points at the top. If you look at the skew, we etched the skew on the bottom of all of our stencils so that you know it's going to be on the bottom right. So if you ever have a stencil that you're not quite sure which way it goes, you can always look for that on the bottom right. But with it on the bottom right, it was coming up to a point, and I decided that I wanted the flat surface to be at the top. So I turned my stencil, and then I started taping, and I used 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, like 17 pieces of tape to get this on here. So what we're going to do is we are using a dome brush. So if you are new to stenciling, or if you've been stenciling for a while and you have a problem with bleeding under, it might be because of the brush that you use. Sometimes we have old brushes in here. I don't even see one. But a lot of times people will use a flat brush rather than a domed brush. And when you use a flat brush and you are stenciling, you are either swirling, which is in a circular motion, or you're stippling, which is in a patting motion. If your brush is flat, the entire brush is going to be on your project the entire time. And if you're using a dome brush, only a small portion of the bristles actually go on the brush just right at the tip. So when you are on your project, there's less brush on the project, which means you will have a less likely chance of bleeding under. There are some other things to consider. You're gonna put some paint on your brush, then we recommend coming over to a paper towel and swirling off about 10-15 swirls before coming to your project. So if you have too much paint on your brush, then you are going to increase your chances of bleeding under. And then we are just coming to our project and doing a swirling motion. One other factor, so maybe you are using a dome brush already, maybe you are swirling off before you're coming to your project, but maybe you're still bleeding under. That could also be because you're putting too much pressure on your brush. We are just lightly grazing the surface, not really pushing down at all. If you are pushing down on your project and you're really getting it in there, that could be the reason why you're still bleeding under if you are doing the other steps. So with this, I just did one light dusty swirl, and we're going to do a quick reveal here and lose some of our tape. And there we go. So now we have a little bit of the gold in the top right corner with our honeycomb. I'm going to add some random honeycombs around the rest of the project, and I'll see you when I'm done. So we have a couple of our honeycombs painted. I went ahead and did the top right, and then to even it out, I came down to the bottom left. I didn't do the exact same type of honeycomb. I just taped off a portion, and then I came to the right side again and did another one. So now we're trying to decide where we are going to put our last honeycomb. So I'm putting my stencil on the board to see where there might be some open spaces. And over here on the left-hand side, there's quite a bit of open space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my, this is a triple threat Ghost Rider. It has a black lead, it has a tracer, like a pin top that doesn't have pin in it, and that you can do tracing with it, and it has a white lead. It also has a PVC eraser. So with that, I'm going to take the black lead and I'm just going to mark on my project just a little bit from spot to spot where I can go with my honeycomb. And then I think I'm gonna mark a little bit of the H and a little bit of the swirl, just so I know where the other portions are. So, because I don't want it to be too busy. We have quite a bit of stencil going on, so we don't want to make it too much. So I'm going to come over to my stencil. I see my marks, so I know about where I want my honeycomb to be. So let's take off some of this tape. Actually, I think I'm going to tape that back right on there. I don't want to go over this second row because that's where my H comes in. I do want to come out a little bit so that we're taking up some of that white space. You may have to get more tape after you've put it on and taken it off a few times, because one thing you don't want to happen is bleeding under because your tape is not sticking anymore. So that can be something to take into consideration. Okay, we finally got that taped off, and we are going to go into our paint and get our last honeycomb painted here. And I wanted to show you guys a couple of things. So one, if you're using a light color, you will want to go in and erase your pencil mark before you paint over it. With this one, we're going to glitter at the end, so it doesn't really matter if it is covered or not. But if you have a darker background and you're painting a lighter color over it, once you have your stencil in place, then you'll want to go ahead and erase your pencil mark so you don't have to worry if it's covered or not. Okay, so now I have my honeycomb painted. Pull it off here and voila. So that has a nice little mix of in, a little out, a little diagonal, a little diamond. But if you take a look at this, I made kind of a mess. I didn't tape off my project properly because I wanted to show you how to fix it. So there are a couple of different ways to fix it. And this is something that if you are not a peeker, it is okay to be a peeker and peek under your stencils to see if you're making mistakes, because the key to fixing your mistakes while stenciling is time. So since we noticed this quickly, we can use, this is a PVC click eraser and it is one of our favorite tools. If you take it dry to the project, nothing happens. But if you get it wet and then come to your project, then you can erase away the paint that you just put down. So you're only going to have about 5 minutes after you get your paint on to fix these mistakes. So that's why it is important to peek and not wait until the end to see if you've made any mistakes. Now, if you wait until the end and you notice that there are things that you don't really love, it's okay. There are things you can do. You can take a round brush and you can put it in your background base coat, and then you can just go right over the areas that you're not happy with and then go in and sand. Or if it's something that it's just completely botched, it's okay, it happens, then you can just go back one step. So for this, to go back one step would be to get our polyfoam brush, go into the off-white background, paint over the off-white background, sand it again, and then go back and put our honeycomb back on top of it. All right, so now we're going to get into our main stenciling for our project. We are going to tape down our stencil, and when you're thinking about taping down your stencil, you're going to want to do it in a couple of places. So I put a piece of tape here in the top left, and what's gonna happen if I only put it in the top left is there is a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of chance for error. So we also put one on the opposite corner because then there is no movement. So we aren't going to stencil everything today because I have a really fun thing planned for this outside band. We are going to stencil the words in the middle portion of our stencil. For this middle portion, we are using a really, really dark green that almost looks black. I didn't want to use a regular black just because it's a little more bold. So I decided to go with the green because it's a little more muted and kind of plays off of this rustic background that we have going on. So we're gonna follow the same steps that we did with our honeycomb. We're going to dip into our paint, swirl off, and then come up onto our project and start swirling. So stenciling is a layers game. So we are just going letter by letter, swirling our paint on, just getting a really light and dusty look with our paint. We do not want to come over to our project and have so much paint on our brush that it automatically gives us a really bold look. That is when you run into problems with bleeding under. We've had some people in the past ask us about, well, is it a waste of paint? Isn't that a waste of time? Potentially you might feel that way, but if you have consistent bleeding under and your projects look messy, then at some point you're probably gonna say, okay, I am ready to try something new. So now we're just going to go over our entire project. I do want to show you what it looks like with one layer of paint. So now that we have a little bit of it painted, I'm gonna peel this back, do a little peeking. So then you can see it's just a nice thin dusty layer. We don't have any goopiness. We don't have any bleeding under. You can still see through the background. You can still see through the honeycomb. Let me show you what a second layer looks like compared to the one. So I am still swirling here. I'm going to swirl on the word hive And then I'm going to show you what stippling looks like on the word rules, and then compare that to our little bee, which just has one layer on it. So stippling is our tapping motion where you're patting up and down. It does apply quite a bit more coverage faster, but there is a better chance of bleeding under when you do this because you are pushing paint up into the brush. More paint stays in the brush, so there is a chance that with more paint that you will bleed under a little more. Okay, so I got the R and the U, so let's see what this looks like. I'm gonna peel this back. So this is Hive with 2 layers. The R and the U had the stippling, so it's a smidge darker. It's not really noticeable, but it is a little bit darker. And then the LES had just the 1 layer and the B had just 1 layer. So you can see the difference between 1 layer with almost no paint, a layer with a good amount of paint, and then the 2 layers. You can already start to see a difference when you start to add those layers on. Okay, we got our stenciling done. I ended up doing about 3 layers on this. Let's do a little sneak peek. It really pops, but it's not super bold, which I think is perfect for this project with the rustic background. I love how the black pops and actually makes the gold pop just as much. So now we are going to leave our stencil on here, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do to the outer band. We're actually going to use some gold foil. So let me show you. We were working this project through in our heads, trying to figure out how we wanted to make it work. And I had an idea, but I wasn't sure how it was going to work out. So you guys, we test everything out. We just don't come to the board and be like, okay, let's see if it works. No, we really go through and do trial and error, try some different things. So what we're going to do to finish off this project is we have our honeycomb. We are going to use the gold foil to make the banding really gold and shiny. And then we're going to go back over portions of our honeycomb and add glitter, which is going to add a little bit of pop and shiny effect and really bring out the gold, the honeycomb, and be a drastic effect on the rustic background. So let's talk about foiling. We have a Facebook Q&A that we do live every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. So make sure that you head over to our Facebook page so that you can come on there. We do lessons and answer your questions live. We also upload those here to our YouTube channel. We have one that we did entirely on adhesives and which adhesives we love, which ones didn't work as well. But this Alien Stick and Restick is one of our favorites for adding foil to projects. So how we will use it is we have this, we call this the ink sweeper, and you can get it on StudioR12.com. We add it to, we just put it down on our palette. It looks like glue. We add it to our ink sweeper, and then we will go across our project. We leave the stencil on for this portion so that the sticky adhesive only goes where we want it to through our stencil. Now, when you pour it out, it looks like glue. It's really white. Once you know when it's ready to go ahead and add your adhesive, or if you are using this on the back of your stencil, if you have one that's really floppy or one that you want in a particular place, you can use this on the back of your stencil to paint and then lift it back up. But it will start to get a clear color rather than that white. So I'm going to pull this back. We're going to take off our stencil. We're going to pull this back here. I'm going to take this down on here. And we are going to come to our sticky surface. We're going to get our foil, and we're going to get just a little makeup sponge. We're going to lay the adhesive over top of where we put our sticky, and we are just going to rub through it with a decent amount of pressure. So how the foil works is you rub through it, and then when you pull it off, the gold comes off on your project. So I'll show you how that looks once we get it rubbed off here. And then we are going to peel it back, and look how amazing that is. And then you can see where it came off on our foil. It took the gold portion completely off, and now it's just sheer. But let's see if, you see that? Can we see how shiny that is? I love it. So this is super fun, super easy, and a really fun way to add a little bit of pop to your project to just give it a little more pizzazz than just having the layer of paint. All right, so let me get this added and then we'll come back to glitter. Are you ready for the big reveal? I love this project and I cannot wait to show you. Okay, so let's pull off the stencil here and voila. Isn't this the coolest? We have the rustic background, we have our pop of bee, we have our really shiny gold leaf. But one of the beautiful things about the gold leaf is that in some of the spots, it didn't come like really, really full and shiny, which works perfectly with the background that we already have. So I do want to show you a few things with the gold foil. So this is what the gold foil looks like once you put it down on your project. So you can actually see all the little strips that came off and where the foil was. So we try to use these as much as possible and get as much gold off as we can. We will save all of these just in case we have another project that we want to use. But if you come over here and you put your sticky down and you rub your gold leaf over it and it's not quite as bright as what you want, you can just stick it right back over, continue to rub it, and then just peel it off and it will get a little bolder. And you can go around your project and continue to do that over and over. Or if there's a spot that you just didn't feel got as much sticky on it, then you can just re-stick through through your stencil and do it again. Now, I am going to go with my sandpaper over my project because there were a couple little spots just here and there that got gold that I didn't necessarily want gold. Now, I'm not saying I hate it because it kind of just pulls it all together, but I'm just going to go in with a little sandpaper scrap sheet and just go over a few areas that got a little gold that I didn't want. Now, you are going to, and that was just because I totally buffed, you want to sand in the same direction. So if you initially sanded going vertically, when you're coming in here to fix this, you will also want to sand vertically. So that could potentially get you into a spot where you don't have a lot of room. So you'll just kind of want to dig where you can. And because if you sand horizontally, after you've sanded vertically, you're gonna have a little like check pattern for your sanding. So then you can also go through and maybe some of the center lines got a little blurred. You can run your sandpaper through it, but gosh, I super love how this turned out. Now, we have, if you have your sticky on your stencil, this will stay on your stencil until you clean it off. So if you're using your stick and re-stick on the back because you want to use it rather than use tape to keep your stencil down, the sticky will stay on here. You can see I just have it along the edges and it's coming up and sticking to my hands. It will stay on there as long as you keep it on there. If you don't want it on there anymore, you just go to the bathroom, put it under the sink, and it will wash right off. So we talked about glitter, and I had planned on glittering this project. Now that I see it all together, I don't want to glitter it, but I do want to show you how I had planned to glitter. So I'm going to come over here to my spare board. We have our honeycomb in the background. You can see our place where we put our foil. So I'm going to come back into, move my project over to the side. Going to grab my honeycomb again after I take my tape off and come find a place on my project where I can stick it. So you'll want to tape this down just so that it doesn't go anywhere. You can just tape through your project. I'm going to get my gold glitter, and I have the handiest little glitter tray. I can't wait to show you how that works. So I'm going to come back into my yellow paint. I'm going to get a little bit of new yellow paint. This has been sitting here for a while, and I want to make sure it's nice and wet and not really dried up. And we're going to go through our stenciling process again. However, we're going to cover up the section that we did our gold foil on. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to use our multi-masker. You can also use a piece of tape just to cover that up. We'll get a little bit of yellow on our brush, come over and swirl off, and we'll swirl back on our project, getting it nice and wet with our paint so that we can put our glitter over top of it. So we'll leave our multi-masker where it is, come into our glitter. I'm gonna put my little tray underneath. Oh, I've spilled this glitter 100 times today. I'm not the cleanest when it comes to the glitter. Let's just say that. And we're going to sprinkle our glitter over top of our paint. And this is kind of a time-sensitive project because you'll want to do it while the paint is wet. But if we look right here, there we go. Shake this, take this off, shake this off. And there you have your glittered honeycombs, but your banding doesn't have the glitter. So then what we could do is just come back to this other side and put our stencil down, paint our honeycombs, glitter through our stencil, and then you could have your honeycombs glittered, you could have your banding be the foil. Now, I also want to talk to you about finishing your project. If you are going to be using glitter on a project, you will want to use a matte spray enamel. When I originally painted this, it was beautiful. And then we carried around a little bit and some of the glitter started falling off, and then we kind of rubbed our hand on it just so we could test it out, and the glitter kept falling off. So then we sprayed it. We did a really good shake of this. We just got it from one of the hardware stores. We sprayed it over our project, and then the glitter didn't come off. However, I will say you will want to go outside and not spray it indoors. There's a lot of fumes that come with it. So don't do this inside, but if you are going to be using glitter on a project, you will want to use a spray varnish. Now, let me show you how this cute little tool works. So this is just our little glitter tray. It has a little knob that comes off the edge. Open up our glitter container, and then you just pour the glitter right back into the container. Ooh. And then you don't have nearly the mess of trying to get it on a piece of paper and trying to get it back in there. It just goes right into the little spout. If you love this project and want to see more from StudioR12 Stencils, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring the bell so that you can be notified anytime we add new tips, tricks, and tutorials.